became complacent about tying our national prosperity to one trading relationship. Maybe this is our wake up from this is the end of our holiday from history.
Jason, finally, we have this special episode on Western Center of Between Two Jasons. Great to see you. Welcome to Western Center for the first time.
Thanks very much. I think I had 4 Jasons in my cabinet. You can never have too many.
I think we're down to one. Yes, down to one now, and it hurts me each time. They are all missed. So, does it feel like Canada's sense of itself has changed in the last week or so?
Yeah, I think to some extent, but we've always had this uh, love-hate relationship with the United States, and it's become a lot more fraught in the last few weeks, quite apart from the huge existential economic threat, the 51st state talk and the flippancy of it. I think has, I'm sure, been damaging to our national morale. I'm in a kind of an old school, large T Tory Canadian. I have ancestors who came up here as United Empire Loyalists because they didn't like that revolution. And they wanted to be loyal to the crown. I had people who fought in the defense of Canada, the crown, our approach to ordered liberty then in the War of 1812, the Fenian raids. So it's pretty much, it courses through my blood that um, we are different, and there's deeply grounded and admirable historical reasons for that. So I find the kind of flippant abuse of our national dignity. It's for me, it's a profound disappointment because at the same time, as a modern Canadian conservative, one of my default positions has always been uh, an admiration for what's best of the United States and an understanding of the importance of that relationship. So it hurts.
It hurts. I mean, you said Canada's morale hurt, but we're also seeing a good dose of patriotism, a bit of a rallying around the flag. Maybe something like we saw, I don't know, but during COVID, but there have been, or other certain threats and points in our history, this boycotting of American booze. We hear some people booing the anthem. I mean, again, conservatives have always been like, where's the patriotism? Where's the patriotism in our government? Where's the patriotism among Canadians? We need to restore that. This threat seems to have done it, eh?
Well, I do hope that it's created a greater sense of unity. Um, Look, I am not, I have no reason to be partisan. I'm not on any ballot, okay? So I qualify what I'm about to say with that. Uh, I do think that the last 10 years have been actually what's happened here in Canada have been deeply damaging to our sense of national unity, identity, purpose, and morale. A government that is basically, whose position has essentially been, sometimes explicitly, that Canada is a illegitimate settler state designed to perpetuate institutional racism, colonialism, white supremacy, and not just historical, but active genocide. We take our flag down for half a year. We are the first post-national state with no core identity. Um, and with massive volumes of immigration, a large and growing percentage of the population that haven't really had a chance to integrate, to get to know Canada's historically grounded identity. Um, I regret that Mr. Trudeau has helped to achieve what a novelist Yann Martel mockingly referred to as Hotel Canada. I think there's still a lot of pride in this country and what it is and can be, but perhaps if some good can come of this, if we can make some lemonade from the lemons of these attacks, it will be a renewed sense of national purpose.
All that said, how do you feel Canada's response to this has been so far? I mean, it seems like it's not just the feds. I mean, the premiers have been coming together and standing largely behind him. How do you feel that the response has been? I mean, we don't have tariffs, I guess. That's something I gotta say, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's been hasty and improvised, but necessary. Um, but uh, for all of the outrageous things that have been done and said, the truth is that uh, we as a country became too complacent. Became far too complacent about our national defense, our national security. We became complacent about tying our national prosperity to one trading relationship. Um, and we, in that sense, um, maybe this is our wake up from our, this is the end of our holiday from history. You remember Canada took a post Cold War peace dividend when we had already been the smallest contributor to NATO defense before that. So that's just part of the context of this. It's time for us as a country to put on our big boy pants. It's time for us to stop talking about things like productivity and competitiveness and actually damn well do it. It's time for us to uh, build that energy infrastructure that there's no reason we should not have the kind of wealth as Norway, third largest oil reserves in the world, fifth largest natural gas, countries around the world desperate, great geographic location. We are closer to both the European and Asian markets for energy and other products than far closer than the United States or the Middle East. We can do that. We can, if we get serious about this, knock down the massively destructive internal barriers to trade, commerce, movement of people and goods. We can get serious about our national security, um, and that includes the threats to our peace and stability that come from south of the border, the guns that uh, cause murder on our streets being smuggled from the United States, the drugs being imported across the American border. Like, okay, so let's use this wake-up call. Let's not just sort of fall back into our national slumber of the kind of mediocrity that has been helped to create these problems.
I mean, but this is a country that's had success. We've forged a lot of trade deals with other countries. Europe, see
Yeah,
the TPP. That hasn't really accomplished a lot yet, but we've signed them. We've talked a lot about internal trade barriers. There have been pacts and deals. It's not. I mean, why has it not happened yet? You think it's this
yeah,
urgency situation, or?
yeah. I think in part, look, you're right about like at a kind of abstract level, we've understood the need to diversify export markets. I was part of a federal government, the Harper government, that I think signed, if you include the TPP and the Canada-Europe trade agreement, plus a bunch of bilateral agreements, I think we signed free trade agreements of pretty high quality with about 45 countries. And we all hoped and believed that that would help us to become less dependent on the American export market, but it didn't really, because we don't make a lot of things. Let's be honest. I think part of the problem. This is the what do you? This is a Western Canadian broadcast, so you'll pardon me for have my Western perspective. I think some of the kind of liberal Laurentian elites who have directed a lot of modern Canadian economic policy, imagine they don't actually understand the Canadian economy. They actually think that, our economy, the future of our economy is it's the new economy, it's all digital, it's all 20 somethings and startups with skinny jeans. And by the way, then what do? We come along and hammer the hell out of them with a hike in the capital gains tax rate. The truth is this: we are a natural resource based economy. We shouldn't be ashamed of it. We should stop this massive accretion of policy that strangled natural resources. I mean, look at one of the big issues. Why do the Americans need us? In part, critical minerals, a source of critical minerals that's not China, and the Ring of Fire deposits of critical minerals in Northern Ontario. We've been talking about that for 20 years. Not a shovel has moved. Um, and so we've got like we and some things have lined up, by the way. 10 years ago, if we were talking about massively expanding our resource exports, we would have said there's big Indigenous challenges. Well, there are always going to be Indigenous challenges, but I think broadly, certainly in Western Canada, First Nations overwhelmingly have come on board as partners in responsible resource development. I believe we're likely going to have a federal government later this year that's going to radically streamline environmental processes and to get to yes as quickly as possible and do everything possible to incentivize that. And maybe now, with this kick in the pants coming from Washington, we can actually get to the dream of the Federation as an economic union. And in particular, I'm thinking about Quebec, understanding that its fiscal transfers and its prosperity is tied in part to shipping natural resources country. Polling suggests that a supermajority of Quebecers agree with that. It would be nice if their government finally did.
It's interesting to hear even John Wilkinson, the federal energy minister, yesterday saying, our
Yes.
vulnerabilities are different, are exposed. Maybe we do need to seriously talk about an east-west oil pipeline. We seem in polls
Well,
seems like the east is
that
more. I mean, do you think that Canada's going to leverage this moment?
well, I hope so. I mean, better late than never. I must say, I'll never forget being at Sierra Week in Houston in March of 2020 when with the COVID recession, as you recall, global energy prices collapsed and we were in negative price territory, but also we had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this renewed focus on energy security. Jonathan Wilkinson stood up in front of a room of some of the world's leaders in the oil and gas sector and basically droned on for half an hour about decarbonization. Not once did he mention that Canada was responsible for 65% of US oil imports, that we have the third largest reserves, that we are one of the only major producers in a liberal democracy with publicly traded, transparent companies, that we can and should produce more. He didn't talk about LNG exports to Europe to displace Russian gas. And so, what? Okay, fine. Now, maybe the lesson's been learned. But I would say, like, I think Canadians have always been there. I don't think I've never, I don't think Canadians have been demanding that we shut down our largest industry that produces more tax revenue than any other. I think Canadians know that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, that we can be a leader in environmental responsibility, that we can actually, that the more effective way to reduce global carbon is vast quantities of Canadian natural gas to displace thermal coal fire production in Asia and the developing world. Canadians know that intuitively. That's far more effective than punitive carbon taxes on heating people's homes. So I think there is a paradigm shift happening now. I hope and believe it's going to inform the next federal election, but it better damn well be expressed in concrete policy terms very quickly.
I mean, do you think that, I think one of the things that people, maybe this is made people realize is, I don't know how many Canadians really knew outside of Alberta that the number one export by a long shot was oil to US. Like that was, and I wonder if that's been
Fair
changing
point.
people's
And I
minds
think,
on this.
although people like me used to say it till I was blue in the face, but you're quite right. Look, I think literacy about the Canadian awareness of the real state of the Canadian economy uh, and our trading relationships and the critical importance of natural resources in general, oil and gas in particular, has probably gone off the charts in the last month for anybody who's paying attention. So yeah, I should be hopeful. I'm sorry if I'm sound angry and churlish, but I've been watching this slow motion train wreck unfold for too long. Um, but on the
It,
positive, let me remind you, it was uh, a Quebec-led Liberal government, the Chrétien government, that approved all of the current major oil sands projects that led to effectively a doubling, nearly a tripling of Canadian oil output,
and the tax incentives, yes.
and the accelerated capital cost reduction that underscored it. Um, so, we're not that far away from a time when there was a national understanding about how to be a prosperous resource country, and how that can be tied to primary manufacturing, making things as well, et cetera. So, yeah, that was a consensus in Canada maybe 15, 20 years ago. I think it's reemerging right now.
But what was a consensus up till, I mean, it's maybe a few months ago, certainly when you were down in Sierra Week in 2020, was that America was this reliable, hungry customer for oil. And while we needed to diversify, there wasn't a sense that we needed to move away from them. I mean, at that same year, your government was offering $1 billion more to expand Keystone Pipeline, which would have made us, in a way, more reliant on oil. I mean, that whole paradigm. I mean, hasn't that whole paradigm shifted?
It has. However, I do think, and maybe this is, I'm being defensive about this, but I do think that maybe one way of getting on of a judo move with President Trump is to make a deal with him on that. Because here's the paradox. he complains about the $200 billion quote unquote Canadian ripoff, by which he means our trade surplus, which I think is actually $120 billion. And as you know, that is almost entirely correlated to our oil exports, because in virtually every other sector, we're running a trade deficit against the United States. So he's complaining about that trade, Canadian trade surplus rooted in our oil exports, of which he wants more. Prime Minister Trudeau tells me that like 20% of the conversation at Mar-a-Lago in December was about Trump wanting Keystone XL, and he has said it publicly. So he actually wants more of the product that's driving the Canadian trade surplus. So let's give him more.
I gotta
I
stop
think
you
if the
there.
Canadian government, the Alberta government were to underwrite it in the same, de-risk it, I mean, not obviously Keystone XL itself, but de-risk a project like that, that with his support, if they were to declare it a project under the Defense Procurement Act, we've already got 400 clicks of pipes strung between Hardisty and Montana. You could buy pipe stations from South Bow, the spin-off of TC Energy. You could get that done in this term of government, sell them an extra 900,000 barrels a day, solve for a long time the egress limitations of the oil sands, greenlight new greenfield upstream investment for production, um, and uh, and still drive for coastal pipelines. I don't think it's either or. So I think that would be one way of getting him to buy into what he knows intuitively, that he wants to displace OPEC imports with more Canadian.
Okay, got to stop you there because we're short on time. But just one last question: did you say that you're having private conversations with Justin Trudeau about all this? You said what Justin Trudeau told you.
I, we've spoken a couple of times about these issues because the prime minister was my critic in opposition in immigration, so we've known each other for a long time, and obviously I know one or two things about immigration, national security, and energy policy.
Look, all hands on deck. I totally understand the impulse to have this conversation, and you're not in the partisan racket anymore, so I get all that. Jason, really great talking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. Take care.